Welcome to TrineDay's Roundtable 18. From the Crusades to the death of JFK, what does it all mean? A message to King Charles on his coronation from a Birthdate Soulmate, with publisher Kris Millegan, husband and wife co-authors Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould, and Earthrights visionaries Alanna Hartzok and Wendell Fitzgerald. I am Torres, moderating. Paul and Liz have written a proposal for world peace. Alanna Hartzok's open letter to King Charles on his coronation is the kickoff of the campaign for world peace at valediction.net/world-peace. Alanna is an educator, activist, and lecturer in the areas of economic justice, land rights, and commons rent public finance. She is also a birthdate soulmate of King Charles. They were born as the stars appear within 10 minutes of each other on November 14th, 1948, making Alanna King Charles' astrological twin sister. Wendell Fitzgerald was the executive director of the Northern California Henry George School of Social Science from 1976 to 1979, and president of the board until 2019. Paul and Liz will further introduce Alanna, but first, our host, TrineDay publisher, writer, researcher, musician, and intelligence brat who has been exploring conspiracy theory land for over 50 years, Kris Millegan.
Thank you very much. And isn't this wonderful for us to get together and discuss, our future? And isn't it nice that we can do that? One thing I've talked about a lot is that we're very privileged here in the United States of America, this experiment to try and do our own affairs instead of having to be told what to do by a king or a pope or something like that. We're a community. It behooves us to help the weakest in our community. And, we need to not just dog eat dog and try and rule over everybody, but we need to cooperate and live together because, gosh, it is a beautiful blue ball that's spinning through space that we get to live on. And hopefully let our children be here too. And remember, the Native Americans talk about looking 7 generations out. We've been waylaid by profiteers and propagandists, and it's time for us to take back our world and our future, and we can do it. And this is one of the ways that we can do it, by discussing, see where we're at, and plan a better future. Onwards.
Thank you, Kris.
Thank you. Well, before Alanna delivers her letter, to provide some historical context to King Charles's coronation and its implications for the future, Paul will read from the Valediction Resurrection on the Fitzgerald family's 16th century involvement with London and Queen Elizabeth at the beginning of the British Empire.
Chapter 4. Finding Hooker's 1586 translation of Giraldus Cambrensis' 1187 Expugnatio Hibernica was easy. Accepting what he had to say about the Fitzgerald family was not. Hooker's translation is part of Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland, published in 1586 and dedicated to Sir Walter Raleigh, Liz said, reading down the page. And it's not just about the conquest of Ireland. It's a 400-year history from Henry II through Queen Elizabeth I. 1586 is just after the Desmond War, I said, as I began to read out loud. I began to consider the 2 great and wonderful works of God, both his severe judgment against traitors, rebels, and the disobedient, and of his mercy and loving kindness upon the obedient and the dutiful. But of all others, none to be compared to this tragical discourse of Ireland and the most unnatural wars of the Desmonds against her sacred majesty. It gets better, Liz said as she pointed to a paragraph toward the end of the page. Quote, whose disobedience the Lord hath in justice so severely punished and revenged, as the like hath not in our age been seen nor known. I took the book in hand. So there you have it. The hatred of the Fitzgeralds was already there in 1586. Quote, the Earl of Desmond, named Gerald Fitzgerald, was descended of a younger house of the Geraldines of Kildare, and both of them descended from one and the same ancestor, Gerald of Windsor, a noble gentleman of Normandy, who after his arrival into England traveled into Wales, and there married the Lady Nesta, daughter to the great Rosines Prince of South Wales, and by others had issue Maurice Fitzgerald, ancestor of the aforesaid Geraldines, and for their truth and fidelity were advanced to honor. Liz was shocked. Hooker is certainly making it clear that the Fitzgeralds were originally revered by the royals, she said, shaking her head. They must have really crossed a red line, I replied, continuing on. Quote, and in the beginning of King Edward III's reign, Maurice Fitzthomas, a younger brother of that house, was created Earl of Desmond, and from thence, as before, they continued as faithful subjects for the course of sundry hundreds of years, until this brain-sick and breakdance Gerald of Desmond and his brethren, allies, and accomplices, forgetting the honor of his house and forsaking their faith, did break into treasons and showed themselves open enemies, traitors, and rebels, using all manner of hostilities and outrages to the impeach of her most sacred majesty and the destruction of the Commonwealth. Liz frowned. Hooker is said they had no problem with the Fitzgerald family until the Earl of Desmond came along. We know the Angevins were concerned about their influence back in the 12th century. Hooker's justifying what they did in order to control the historical record, I said. And here's what they did. Quote, the price whereof in the end he paid with his and their own bloods to the utter destruction of themselves and that whole family. But first the Earl himself was driven in the end to all extremities and penuries, and at the last taken, and his head was cut off and sent to London, and there set upon London Bridge, and his lands and inheritance confiscated and discontinued from his house and name forever. A notable and a rare example of God's just judgment and severe punishment upon all such as do resist and rebel against the higher powers of his anointed. And the Lord shall root him out from the face of the earth that shall blaspheme his gods and curseth the prince of the people. I think your take on what happened at the Parker House was right on the money, Liz said, grimacing. That old Boston Brahmin Theodore Eliot's attack on you was about being one of those Fitzgeralds. I understand the background now. JFK never had a chance. I shook my head in disbelief. The feud went back to at least Elizabeth I. The Fitzgeralds could claim descent from the kings of Britain through Nesta. They could probably have challenged her claim to the throne, so spilling Fitzgerald blood became a sacred cause and remained one over the centuries, Liz said, as she saw the logic. Gerald Fitzgerald became the sacred sacrifice, a sacred murder to ensure the creation of the British Empire. Walter Raleigh was the master of London's secret conjurers. John Dee, Raleigh, Philip Sidney, Christopher Marlowe, and Edmund Spencer are all in there. The School of Night, they called them. They knew the ancient pagan rules of the game, and Hooker knew what Raleigh knew. So your Aunt Mary was right, Liz said. The British Empire began with the murder of Gerald, the last Earl of Desmond, and the spell continued into the 21st century. As someone whose family suffered a genocide at the direction of the British Crown, it would be natural for me to maintain a safe distance from King Charles today as the current monarch of the British Empire. In fact, there are many today who still claim the right of revenge and retribution for ancient crimes committed against their families. I have learned over the 40 years by my involvement with Afghanistan and research into the Fitzgerald family about the way narratives are crafted and how these apply to our troubled times. The world of 1169 and the world of today share a number of similarities. At the time of the Norman invasion of Ireland, the world was on edge. Power was shifting from the east to the west. Religious fanaticism and zealotry ruled the day. The new millennium had brought about the prophets of doom, and magical beliefs and superstitions were widespread. The second coming and the end of the world was expected at any moment, and a lot of ironclad assumptions about the world we hold today had not yet come to be. Afghanistan gave me a unique perspective on its role in history. The 12th century writings of Gerald of Wales gave me a whole new understanding of the world we live in. But it was only when I read this paragraph from his 1187 Expugnatio Hibernica that I understood how our confusion about the past continues to haunt us to this day. The words I'm about to read refer to the 1169 Anglo-Norman invasion of Ireland, an enterprise largely run by the Fitzgerald family. Quote, AD 1170. After these events, a general assembly of the Irish clergy was held at Armagh, and the coming of the strangers into Ireland was discussed at some length. Finally, they arrived at the following conclusion, that it must be the sins of their countrymen, and especially in punishment for their inveterate custom of indiscriminately buying Englishmen from merchants, bandits, and pirates, and using them as slaves, that the vengeance of heaven had inflicted this evil upon them, whereby they themselves, by a just retaliation, were in turn reduced to servitude by that very nation. For it has been the vicious but common practice of the English people, when their kingdom was yet intact, to offer the children of their country for sale, and that too without the excuse of poverty or famine. Indeed, they would send their own sons and kinsmen to Ireland to be sold.
Now we're ready, I think, to now open up to Alanna's communication, Alanna's effort to bring our story and our case for where we want the future to be to King Charles, and hope that the coronation, before the coronation, to hope that when he finally does become king officially, that he will have some new ideas to work with.
Thank you, everyone who's shown up here today. This has been a labor of love. This was Liz's brainstorm when she found out I was born in the exact same day as Charles. Unless some of my British friends and colleagues have a backdoor to the king, we have no way of knowing whether he'll actually read this, but it's an open letter. So we're seeding the noosphere, if you will, or the zeitgeist with these ideas of the rights to the earth. And this is in service of the bookends from what Liz and Paul have revealed from the Queen Elizabeth I beginning of empire, British Empire, East India Company, and so forth, and the war with the Fitzgeralds that he's described, to what can be understood and hopefully as the end of empire with Queen Elizabeth II and now Charles. So as I think it happened when Paul and Liz read through this, they thought it was a manifesto. So we're calling it the Earth Rights Manifesto. Your Majesty, I write to you as your astrological twin sister. Yes, we were both born on the 14th day of November, 1948, and as the stars appear within 10 minutes of each other. My mother sometimes laughingly said that this about the day she and your mother gave birth to us. That woman is doing the same thing as I am. Why is she getting all the attention? I write to you as someone who also raised 2 children, who loves to garden and ride horses as you do, and both our mothers did, and as one who cares deeply about the state of our world as you do. As your astrological twin sister, I write this open letter to you in the hope that you might be moved to engage in a conversation with people from around the world. Together as king and commoners, I think that we can find clarity for a way forward, a way to end poverty, homelessness, and hunger, and to build a world that works for everyone, including the animals and plants, indeed for life itself. Through our sincere conversation, I'm certain right action will follow, and we will create a world where justice will keep the peace, and thus will we end the scourge and abomination of war once and for all. UK resident and Irish scholar Kevin Cahill wrote a magnificent book titled Who Owns the World, which is the first compilation of landowners and land ownership structures in every single one of the world's 197 states and 66 territories. Who Owns the World covers the history of land ownership as far as written history allows, and shows the division of land ownership in every region of the globe. Cahill identified the person who owns the largest proportion of the world's land and documents that person's land holdings. That person was your mother. Now it is you, my dear astrological twin brother. With the crown comes your leadership role in the governments and thus the people of the British Commonwealth. You will bear an enormous responsibility in your vested legal ownership of over 1/6 of the planet's surface. You will reign in 32 countries and territories, having a total landmass of 6,698 million acres, which will bear your name as superior or ultimate owner. In contrast, the United States as a country has 2,400 million acres, while Russia has 4,200 million acres. As Cahill says, this is a phenomenon never to be seen elsewhere on Earth. The word own is used deliberately, being the word her Canadian Attorney General's office used to describe the legal status of all of Canada's vast territory. What we commoners know about what you, as now King Charles III, owns in personal property in UK is this. Private or near private landed possessions in the home territory come to about 637,000 acres. This makes my 3.5-acre family homestead quite minuscule. Indeed, yet we are so grateful to have it for our beautiful flower, vegetable, and water gardens, pasture for animals, and woodlot. In Who Owns the World, Cahill describes in great detail the legal machinations of the Crown's ownership rights. He says that these are a manifest continuation and legitimization of feudalism in the modern world. Of the rights asserted in Magna Carta, he tells us that the barons did not question the king's feudal superiority and his overall ownership of the land of the realm. You bear an enormous responsibility as you are technically and legally the ultimate owner and controller of by far the greatest proportion of the Earth's territory compared to anyone else. Thus, a stunning opportunity will be placed upon your shoulders as the crown is placed upon your head on May 6th, your coronation day. You will have a highly visible capacity to ask one of the most important questions of our time, that of not just who owns the world, but of how should the earth be owned? And this question of earth ownership has been central to my own life's quest. I want to share with you some of what I have learned in this regard, as detailed in my award-winning book, The Earth Belongs to Everyone. During my time since we were born, I have come to the realization that the ultimate claim of ownership of the Earth's land and natural resources cannot be made on the basis of prior claim, discovery, purchase, military conquest, ability to maintain and secure possession, constitutional law, or length of residency. Ultimately, the only rational, supportable, moral, just, and ethical basis upon which a claim of ownership can be made is by birthright to the gifts of nature, and that cannot be an exclusive claim. The claim by birthright can only be legitimate if it is not acknowledged that all other human beings have an equal claim to land and natural resources. The deepest ethical dimension of territorial rights recognizes that humanity is one and indivisible in its fundamental claim to the earth as the birthright of all. When people of the planet owe a great deal of gratitude, as well as profound apologies for the manner in which we have treated indigenous people who have lived longer and closer to the precepts of natural law than most of the several billion of us. Colonization declared their lands terra nullius, meaning void of human habitation, as church and state considered native people to be savages and subhuman. We can understand the Native American word Wetiko to mean those whose consciousness is that of being separate from the earth and from each other, whereas Native people viewed the world as a whole and all human beings as related to all of nature. They said in their greeting and prayers, Matokuya Oyasin, meaning all my relations. John Mohawk, a Native American leader and university academic, said this in his essay on the problem of the modern world. When land became a commodity and lost its status as provider and sustainer of life, Western civilization began its history of subjugation and exploitation of the earth and earth-based cultures. For 5 centuries, people have been coerced from their land holdings. The problem in the English-speaking world has its roots in the 16th century. Mohawk was speaking of the enclosures period, when masses of common people in Britain, Scotland, Ireland, and elsewhere were forced off of their customary commons and other land holdings. Enclosure could be accomplished by buying the ground rights of all common rights to accomplish exclusive rights of use, which increased the value of the land. The other method was by passing laws causing or forcing enclosure, such as the parliamentary enclosures. The latter process was something accompanied by force, resistance, and bloodshed, and remains among the most controversial areas of agriculture and economic history in England. As King Charles III, you have a profound opportunity to address and redress massive wealth inequality and also reverse several hundreds of years of enclosures by welcoming the commoners back to the Commonwealth for the common good. You have in your power
Something happened.
Yeah, something, what
a
happened?
practical.
Alanna, can you
Oh,
hear
yeah.
me?
Yes.
Would you pick up that third sentence in that as King Charles paragraph? You have in your power several ways.
You have in your power several ways to restore the birthright to the earth of multi-millions of people. If there's any problem, I can take off my video. I think I'm going to take off my video now just so that
That might help your bandwidth delivery.
it'll help my bandwidth. Okay, so there's four main points, four big points of what the ask is, or the request is that we would like him to do. And if he's not doing it, we, the people, can have a direction of what needs to be done. So, one, in my favorite interview with you, you talk about the importance of preserving the smallholder way of life, exalting the combination of natural ecosystems, the forests and the agricultural areas, together with the human cultural systems. You could act the wizard and with the wave of your scepter, place a substantial portion of your landed wealth into public trust to establish these kinds of ecological villages where people can create beautiful places to dwell, plant nutritious vegetable gardens and orchards, pasture a few animals, and maintain woodlots for home building and furniture making material. Your own estates are well managed, and from their hubs, you can teach and train people in organic farming and other homesteading skills. People can also learn from the global eco-village network and permaculture movements. You've probably heard of the community of Findhorn in Scotland, one of the original planetary light centers, emerging worldwide, that are based on harmonization with the laws of nature. I find of great inspiration the Russian ringing cedars movement, launched by an amazing wise woman, Anastasia, the avatar of Siberia. Her movement succeeded in its efforts to secure land for the people for ecological family domains, actualized by acts passed by the Duma, the Russian parliament. Thousands of people have been leaving the cities to find their livelihoods and direct connection with Mother Earth. You may be aware of the La Mas eco-village in Wales.
Alanna, 1 second.
Yeah, a little background noise.
Yeah, could all audience please mute yourselves? Dean, a couple others. We don't know who it is, but why take a chance? Let's all mute if we're not Alanna. Gordon, Bastien, paging Gordon, fellow named Bob. Bob who? We don't know. But if you're not Alanna or me, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Or Kris.
Number two, a relatively few ultra-wealthy people own a disproportionate share of urban lands worldwide. Your own metropolitan acreage in London has a notional value of over 4,600 million British pounds. Again, this is Kevin Cahill's information. There's lots of footnotes throughout this letter. In urban areas where land values are greatly concentrated, you can address the increasing poverty and wealth inequality via fundamental tax reform. You can work with Parliament to remove the tax burden from people who work for a living, earned income, while shifting the tax base to the land rent, which is unearned income, as land value is created by society as a whole. This will remove the urban bits of Mother Earth from speculation, hoarding, and private profiteering. This tax shift off of labor and onto land rent would procure ample funds for needed infrastructure and other public goods. As Dr. Paul Collier, professor of economics there at Oxford University and author of The Bottom Billion, says, density is valuable, and that value is reflected in the price of land. In the urban centers, there are enormous rents on rising land values. The taxation of land appreciation offers huge scope for financing the cost of urban infrastructure. In A Place to Live, Barriers to Affordable Housing in UK and Worldwide, Heather Wetzel, chair of the UK Labour Land Campaign, and present here in our webinar. Welcome, Heather, the author of this. She discusses the primary reasons why housing is out of reach to rent or buy for so many. She shares her concerns about our increasingly divided society of rich and poor and consequent social and economic problems. Heather puts forward land value tax and other fundamental policy proposals that can solve the housing and land problem, and at the same time, she addresses environmental challenges. Land rent for public finance, aka land value taxation, can be traced back thousands of years, as far, in fact, as the Vedic period, from which came Hinduism and Buddhism. It also threads through the Abrahamic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The tax history of China tells us that Mencius strongly supported this form of public finance. Land value taxation is the golden thread of perennial wisdom teachings on land justice that, when implemented, has yielded balanced, harmonic, and fair societies that are attuned to natural law. Charles Avila, a leader in the Philippines and now a good friend of mine, is the author of the classic work titled Ownership: Early Christian Teachings. Avila tells us that Christianity lost its original economic teachings of Jubilee justice when it became the religion of the Roman Empire. Land as the koina is held as a sacred trust in the Abrahamic faith tradition, but under imperial rule became dominium, which entailed the legalization of land acquired by conquest and plunder. The American political economist Henry George rediscovered these key economic teachings about land justice and set them forth in his magnum opus, Progress and Poverty, which launched him to worldwide recognition. His lectures throughout the United States and in the UK, Ireland, and Australia made a lasting impact, as there are numerous organizations working today to implement land value taxation. Among them is the International Union for Land Value Taxation, a United Nations NGO, for which I serve as administrator. And we have here in our listeners, Dave Wetzel, who was a former president of the IU. Sun Yat-sen, considered by many to be the father of modern China, built his 3 principles of the people in part upon the teachings of Henry George. Sun Yat-sen said that land value tax is the only means of supporting the government. It's an infinitely just, reasonable, and equitably distributed tax, and on it we will found our new system. Leo Tolstoy was another fan of Henry George. He had a large portrait of him by his writing desk where he wrote several letters to Tsar Nicholas, urging him to implement land value taxation. Tolstoy feared that if the land problem was not addressed, a violent revolution could break out. In his last novel, Resurrection, there is a scene wherein a nobleman is giving land to his serfs. Asking them how they would fairly share the land, the nobleman reads to them a passage from Henry George's Progress and Poverty. When the universal wisdom teachings of sacred rule economics are not put in place, wealth and power inequality grows, along with numerous other social problems. Violent revolution is often the result. Such was the case in France with King Louis XIV, when he asked his court physicians, as they had knowledge of how the blood circulates through the body, to study how wealth was circulating throughout his kingdom. Later to be known as the physiocrats, these founders of classical economics coined the phrase l'impôt unique, the single tax, and urged the French kings to levy taxes on land instead of labor. Mirabeau the Elder said that if enacted, the l'impôt unique would be a social advance equal to the inventions of writing and money. Alas, the French kings paid no heed. The monarchy was formally abolished during the French Revolution, and Louis XVI died at the guillotine in 1793. His death marked the end of 1,000 years of uninterrupted French monarchy. The insights of classical economics, beginning with the physiocrats, continued forward through the next 100 years, when the work and writings of Henry George launched a major movement for land value-based tax reform, With his book, Progress and Poverty, George was one of the leading figures at the end of the 19th century, being as well known at the time as Mark Twain and Thomas Edison. His lectures drew great crowds throughout the US and Britain and Ireland and Australia. He was twice a candidate for mayor of New York City. But power elites who drew vast amounts of wealth from unearned income derived from land and natural resources saw this movement as a threat to their interests. They financed departments of economics at Columbia, Princeton, Cornell, and the Chicago School. Hence the inability of the current reigning body of economic thought, neoliberal economics, to solve the problem of gross wealth inequality while still maintaining the benefits of individual freedom. Neoliberal economics corrupted the field of economics, as it denies that land, the classical economic term for all the gifts of nature, is a specific factor of production and considers the earth itself to be a mere subset of capital. Classical economics has three factors: land, labor, and capital, while neoliberal economics has only two: labor and capital. The corruption of economics was the great intellectual crime of the 20th century. Principles and policies of land value tax are based on natural law. Just consider the territorial ways of nature, whereby parent birds claim a space, a location in a tree, which is a natural resource, to build a nest out of mud and twigs, natural resources. And once the baby birds are hatched, they labor on land by flying around and about to find worms and insects, which is nature, to feed and care for their baby birds until they are fully launched into the wide world. The reason that there's hunger and homelessness on the planet is because humanity is out of step with natural law. As King Charles III, you have a magnificent opportunity to put in place these principles and policies based on natural law. And I, your astrological twin sister, know the very top experts in the world who can be counted on to do the best job of implementing land value taxation throughout the vast areas of land for which you are now responsible. Your wish is my command, as the saying goes. Number 3, let us consider the problem of the exploitation of oil, minerals, gold, diamonds, silver, and other gifts of nature. Millions of people have died in fights over land and natural resource control. Oil and other natural resource extraction should be made strictly on the basis of 1, agreement of those living near the extraction sites; 2, on a not-for-profit basis, yet with fair returns to labor and capital; 3, clearly detailed environmental rules and regulations; and 4, full socialization of the resource rents, surplus value, unearned income. Natural resources and their rents should be carefully utilized and fairly distributed in order to uplift the standard of living of all. Careful stewardship of mineral resources would entail maximum efforts for recycling, as well as using the resource rents to fund renewable energy and other needed public goods, local to global. The Alaska Permanent Fund is an important model for establishing fair share rights to oil and other mineral resources. The APF, with a current total fund value of over $75 billion, collects substantial oil royalties based on the Alaska State Constitution, as the state requires the rights to all minerals, retains the rights to all minerals and other natural resources. The APF dividend program gives each person in Alaska an annual payment based on equal share of the dividend amount. The 2022 Permanent Fund dividend was $3,284, the highest ever in the history of the fund. For a family of 4, this would be over $13,000 because it includes all the children. 4, many tax havens are controlled by the Crown, for which you now bear major responsibility. Tax havens, as you know, are generally small islands with mostly immigrant foreigners engaged in the trades of banker, lawyer, and accountant. These Crown dependencies operate out of the control of the UK government and Parliament. Cahill's research shows us that these territories handle most of the trillions of dollars held outside the main financial systems. He informs us that the UK and the world as a whole has lost countless billions in tax revenue due to these tax havens. Tax havens should not exist. UK Chancellor Gordon Brown asserted that he would return the tax havens to the status of holiday resorts. John Christensen, a forensic auditor and economist who chairs the board of the UK-based Tax Justice Network, tells us that tax havens enable the systemic looting of oil and mineral resources and of the siphoning of proceeds of embezzlement and fraud to the financial markets of London, New York, and Zurich. He estimates that up to $36 trillion of privately owned financial assets are managed from tax havens, which enable the laundering of multi-billions of dollars, pounds, and euros acquired from illicit activities such as drug dealing, and human trafficking. As king, you are in a key position to stop the kleptocrats from continuing in their nefarious, world-damaging ways. John Christensen would surely be delighted to receive your assistance in addressing the multifarious inequities of the tax haven system. I urge you to contact him at the Tax Justice Network. Since unearned income derived from tax cheating and the looting of natural resources is so often used to buy real estate, well, then land-based taxes can capture significant amounts of this money and use it to advance the common good. At the World Bank Conference on Land and Poverty, I presented a paper titled Socializing Land Rent While Untaxing Production. This paper begins with a succinct statement from the founding document for the UN Center for Human Settlements, often known as Habitat. The unearned increment resulting from the rise in land values, resulting from change in use of land, from public investment or decision due to the general growth of community, must be subject to appropriate recapture by public bodies, meaning the community. Socializing land rent and untaxing production is a good summary of the key ideas I am writing to you about and presents a clear way forward beyond right and left that harmonizes the needs of both the individual and society. The sufficiency of rent from unearned income for funding public goods is set forth in both theory and practice. I hereby request that you consider playing a major role in the 2024 Earth Day celebration held at the United Nations on the spring equinox. We will bring forth the key principles and policies of Earth rights, both caring for and sharing Mother Earth. John McConnell was the founder of this original equinox, Earth Day, first proclaimed by the City Council of San Francisco in 1970. McConnell was clear about principles for the global economy and for an economics of peace. When he spoke of justice, he meant economic justice, which he defined as an actual sharing in all the world's resources. In his Planetary Inheritance Declaration, he wrote, "Among the equal rights to men is the right to an equal share in nature's bounty, a right of each man to his planetary inheritance, his share of land, water, minerals. No one, by any compact, can deprive or divest their posterity or any other man's posterity of the right to his portion of earth. We can address and remedy the systemic roots and intent of organized violence, of what my colleague and UK author Fred Harrison calls the predator culture. Understanding the territorial base of political wealth and power is the prerequisite," he says, "for making sense of issues as diverse as genocide, narco-gangsterism, terrorism, and fascism. The struggle over land and resources is at the root of all of today's global crises." Charles, my dear astrological twin brother, will you help the commoners of the world turn the world away from the forces of dispossession, depopulation, and destruction, and move us into a consciousness of profound respect for the creative forces unfolding evolution of harmoniously blending with the autopoiesis, life's capacity to be self-organizing. there is a universal wisdom that is so much deeper than any human science. This wisdom can help us put in place an economic system that will enable each and every member of our human family to secure basic material needs while protecting the Earth's ecosystems for future generations. Everyone can then enjoy the adventure of mental, creative, and spiritual expansion during their brief sojourn on Mother Earth. You come from the bloodlines of the ancient regime. I ask that you stand with all of humanity. I ask that you use your power of goodwill for all by joining with us with a clear intention of securing the birthright of all people to the earth, our planet home, that we may all take responsibility for her care and protection. How we hold the earth is how we hold each other. Securing the birthright to the earth for each and every one of us is part and parcel of the environmental sustainability that you espouse. Billions of us know that this life on our small planet has brought you to a position of enormous privilege and power. You have vast potential to set the world aright. In closing, I trust you will use all that you have been given with great care and wisdom. With warm regards and my very best wishes, Alanna Hartzok, Earth Rights Visionary and United Nations NGO representative for the International Union for Land Value Taxation. Also, Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould and R.A. Kris Millegan.
Amen.
Alanna, what are your first thoughts about how to encourage the discussion? Who might you want to hear from first? What might you want to augment from what you just shared? Where do we go from here?
The Earth Day, April 22nd, that was, someone wrote a note.
The original Earth Day was the equinox. It was declared by John McConnell, as I say in this letter. It's a sad thing that happened because the original Earth Day, where Margaret Mead and many, many leading people, leaders of the United Nations, leaders of many nations, there were 30 leading people signed that. And it began for the equinox of equal balance of North and South, all the meanings of equality in that equinox Earth Day. It was pretty well co-opted by another group of academics and business people to a much nicer spring weather day for April 22nd. It completely lost the original economics of peace and the earth rights that John had so strongly proclaimed and written in his writings. So we are going to bring back worldwide the emphasis for 2024 on the Equinox Earth Day, have celebrations of culture, art, and teach-ins with the emphasis on the earth rights. The earth is our birthright. But thanks for asking the question. We get to clarify it a little bit.
If you go to valediction.net, the masthead along the top, if you go to the title, it says World Peace, and you click on that, that will take you into the page that has all of the PDF files posted.
Kris, what are your thoughts right now?
My main thought is the internet is a wonderful thing. Okay, one thing that it is doing, it is allowing us to get all of this information out there, to have discussions about it. Before the internet, it was a lot easier for the quote unquote powers that be, whatever, to hide. So, you know, we're meeting around a table, we're talking about solutions, how we can have a better world, how we can leave a better world for our children and their children and their children.
You need to realize that this document is actually a profound education. And so you really do need to go get it on the website and read it to other people and take in.
And send it to other people.
Exactly.
Help us with this campaign to reach, all 7 point something billion people on this. We don't know how many people are here because they saw that Wendell Fitzgerald is participating. Wendell, unmute yourself and give us a short and brilliant reaction to this.
And so we can have a party in Ireland.
Ah,
Yes. I was there when Alanna came to the Henry George School in San Francisco, poked her head around the open door, and I happened to be the executive director. She said, is this the Henry George School? And I said, yes. And my first thought was, this one is going to do something very powerful. which has come
Wow.
true. The other piece is, I think it's really clear that we are not talking about disturbing the rights, property rights of use of the planet. Since I'm a common owner of the world, I'd like to have a rent check. And the question I ask is, when was the last time you received a rent check as the equal owner of all the land and all the natural resources?
Without having to move to Alaska.
Without,
Yeah.
yeah. Just the one final piece is what you resist persists. So I'm not opposed to war. I'd say if you want a war, then fine, have at it. If you want a war, we want you to pay for it out of the unearned income that you receive. And all forms of unearned income is 40 plus, probably up to 50% of GNP. So
Just
back.
just imagine the workers not being taxed on their earned income, not being taxed on wages and salaries. Marty Rowland, can you hear me? Your yellow hand is raised.
Yeah, I was thinking that with the conflict within the family with Harry, would it be possible to get him to sign on first and have him deliver this for us?
Great question. Alanna, what's your take on the likelihood of even King Charles or anybody, and how much do we care if there's a response from the royals as we bang the drum to reach the 7-point-something billion people on this planet?
You know, we're going to, and I hope all of you will make effort in your own way. We're going to do as much as we possibly can. There's a media team that's been put together, ready to launch the letter with the cover, and it's going to be posted on the website. And it's really getting it out as many people and as many media people as we can. I'm kind of hoping Epic Times, which is a newspaper that I think is pretty wonderful. I think they might post it. So I have, but it's just that's the answer. As much as we can get it out to
I'm
plant
thinking
these
bigger,
seeds, then we'll
Alanna.
build
Oprah.
movements.
We want Oprah.
You want Oprah?
She does Harry and Meghan. Why not you?
Why not?
Right. In order of the hands I saw, Edward Dodson. Hi.
Phenomenal work, Alanna. Really amazing. I'll do what I can to promote it. My one suggestion is someone try to get Vice News to cover this. It's, in my view, it is the most objective source of news and analysis in the United States. So that would be my main thrust for promotion of this. Somehow get a journalist at Vice News to take an interest.
We've all got to really read this letter over and over until we really understand it. Grab that main book by Henry George.
Progress and Poverty.
Because
Send
we're
a
going to
footnote.
get this, we're going to get destroyed at the dinner table if we start talking about this stuff without really being more and more embedded in it. Watch the playback of this roundtable, which is going to be on YouTube in a couple of weeks. Watch Roundtable 16 on YouTube, on the Valediction Vision YouTube channel, where Alanna does a huge teaching on the sacred rule economics, which reviews the thousands of years where this is how humans learned how to treat each other and regard and adore and cherish and worship the earth and its resources and the ways of life. How mothers of all species nurtured and treated their offspring. So we all learned by watching that, like, well, we better nurture and treat each other nice. Dave Wetzel, I see your hand up.
Excellent project. I think it's really good. Just one word of advice: send it to Buckingham Palace immediately. You will certainly get an acknowledgement when you're interviewed by the media about the letter, when it's properly publicized. At least you'll be able to say, well, I have had an acknowledgement. Once it's in the public domain properly, it might be that you won't get a reply. But I think if you send it privately now, then I'm pretty sure you'll get an acknowledgement.
Why do you feel that, Dave?
Because I've done similar things in the past. I wrote to the Duke of Westminster, and as a result, ended up with a meeting with the Chief Executive Officer of the family trust. He's the richest landowner, not the biggest in terms of acreage, but the biggest in terms of wealth, the biggest landowner in this country. and I got to speak to the CEO of his company, which is Grosvenor Estates. His family name is Grosvenor, but I'm not talking about the current Duke as a young man. I'm talking about the old man that preceded him. And I did once write to Prince Charles, probably about 30 years ago, and I did get an acknowledgement. The acknowledgement was that he doesn't get involved in politics, and yet the very next week he was talking about farming and housing and planning. And I thought, well, if that's not politics, I don't know what is. But
Thank you.
I think it'd be useful to actually get a proper response from Buckingham
Right.
Palace.
It's
We'll
proper
do that. We
protocol.
already have the
Protocol.
address.
We
Liz found the
have the
address.
address, yes.
Top of the letter.
We know
Yeah.
where to send it.
Yeah,
and
it's protocol.
Absolutely,
Sure.
yes.
Thank you, Dave.
But I there's no question that any kind of acknowledgement is useful. But I also want to emphasize that we're really thinking in terms of trying to get enough average people who actually, once they read this and once they actually begin to understand that these ideas are very workable and could be implemented immediately. And the more people who realize this, remember the popularity in the 19th century, and it was actually robbed from the people. The whole economic, teams that sprang up in all the universities were set up to basically destroy the Georgist economic potential. So we're just bringing it back. Once people understand all that, I think we'll have a lot more voices looking at King Charles and saying, well, as the largest landowner in the world, you are the person who's got to start the right ball rolling. And I think that's really what the campaign is about, to really get the energy of people who begin to see there are solutions and there are ways to talk to these people to convince them they have to do the right thing.
Alanna, this is the hidden history that is the fulcrum or the turning point that could fulfill the promise of the founding of America. Does that make sense to you? And could you comment on that?
Absolutely. The founding of America was based upon, it gave us a political democracy, but even that wasn't broad capacity for everybody to vote. It was just male landowners, and it was a struggle step by step so that everybody could have the right to vote. But it brought over the economics from the old world. The land speculation, land grabbing system was never questioned, hence the violence against the native people. The speculation was enormous by the founding fathers themselves. George Washington was out there surveying the land early on so that it could be grabbed. And the money system, the land problem is so huge that in this letter, I did not, except for the tax shelters somewhat, address the money system, but a lot of people know that that's really important. And in Jubilee justice tradition, it's always debt cancellation and land rights, return to the land. Those are the two keys. So on the Liberty Bell, we could not forge a metal bell that did not crack. So there's a crack in that Liberty Bell. I have an image somewhere of a native chief pointing at the crack. But so that is the crack in the Liberty Bell. We don't have the rights to Mother Earth. We don't have economic democracy. On the Liberty Bell is also a quote from Leviticus, which refers to the Jubilee justice tradition. Isn't that interesting?
Well, it reminds me of Charles Avila's book that you mentioned in the letter, Ownership,
Early Christian Teachings.
From Zen, very impressive work. Have you thought of publishing this letter as the core of a project, requesting response and commentary from others? That's a great thing for us who are developing this marketing campaign, Zen. Marty Lewis, please unmute and share with us.
Alanna, I want to say that was just so inspiring. And
Good.
I've worked 50 years in the media, just retired, but I'm the founder of something called the Bridge Think Tank. And I've worked with over 100 Arabic instructors at the DLI, and I'm very connected now to Naval Postgraduate School. And Nancy Merritt and I with the Peace Alliance are connected in with non-conflict studies at Berkeley that have a Zoom called Project Hope. And I really think getting it out to the universities and having them just pump this all over the world, it's going to be the way to go. Because we're gonna
Thank you.
need many hands to get it out there.
Right.
And also
Amen.
the schools of theology,
Oh,
frankly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Get it to everybody, everybody, get it to everybody. Kris Millegan.
It just, the power of the people just happened like in Georgia. They were trying to do some things. The people got out and stood up in the streets and they stopped them. And we just saw what happened in Israel. Okay. I mean, they were trying to really stomp them down. The people went out in the streets and stopped it. So, I mean, there is power in the people in the streets. There's also the power of the people of thought. Okay. And to bring these ideas to fore, we just got to, continue and do it.
Yeah. Peter Nikitas, unmute while I read your comment. Does the recent statement by the Pope on the doctrine of discovery have a bearing on the discussion today? If I'm
Yeah.
correct, the BBC announced that the Vatican disavowed the doctrine of discovery, which comprises the foundational doctrine for subjugation of indigenous peoples in the Americas. Share about that, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I did hear that on the BBC on top of the hour approximately, 5 days ago. Just in passing, I haven't seen anything in any print publication or any other discussion about it. And I wanted to know whether anybody had further news about it and could elaborate on the topic. Thanks.
Yeah.
I would definitely say that is exactly the kind of sign that shows they know they have to start saying and doing things to basically, calm down some things so people don't, start running in the street and protesting. And what we feel we have is a way to empower people beyond just that one issue of undoing a document and the damage is done. We're saying we can actually completely fix the actual conditions that people are suffering from today. So that's one of the reasons why this is like an action plan. It's not just an idea plan. And that's why we feel that the actual letter and the fact that it incorporates the largest landowner in the world. Well, how did he get all that land? This is the history that we're talking about turning basically, war into a legitimate land grab, which is exactly what Roman law did. Once you understand that, I think it gives people a way to go eye to eye, you see, and that's what, any of these very powerful people, when they're dealing with an average human being who can look them in the eye and say, I know how you got wealthy. And I think it's very unfair and we've got to do something about it. What we really need is we need literally a groundswell to understand these things first before they go out and start, trying to deal with the problem.
Truly
The other thing
understands.
about terra nullius, that the lands were declared by the colonizers to be vacant land and therefore just grab it, just occupy it, is that it's kind of easier to declare the end of the land grab when you've already grabbed most of the land by the few. Sounds like it's a nice thing to do for Native people. We've got to show the history, and we've got to show, but that's not enough. Just saying we're stopping terra nullius. We're starting the equal right to the earth for all people.
Might makes right in nature. Bigger animal thumps the weaker one and takes the food. And it's for we humans to actualize the American Revolution, which is rights make might.
One of the issues today that's becoming very contentious is reparations. And I believe that earth rights taxation could actually help neutralize the idea of trying to make up for all of the damage done to previous generations of various peoples, various people who've been taken advantage of or who were slaves or whatever they were, has the potential to really draw a lot of people to feel this is a way for the equity to literally be spread to everyone who has been affected by all the same things we all understand now. And that's why King Charles is so powerful as a representation of the problem. And that's the reason the letter really is important as a foundation for people to take the power of realizing how not only correct you are, but how knowledgeable you are about how it happened And now you have a solution at the same time. And
Amen.
it's totally fair.
Carol, then Wendell, and then I'll read Peter Forrest's comment here. Carol, how are you? Time out,
No.
time out, time out. You got your Mickey Minnie Mouse thing going on. Just love it. Oh. Sing a song while you sound like that. Come on.
Okay,
All right,
maybe she'll,
maybe it'll clear up while we talk to a couple other people. Wendell, unmute yourself.
One of the issue of reparations for past wrongs, I'm all in, except I refuse to pay for any of it out of taxation of my earned income.
Right.
It's completely counterproductive. It would be incredibly powerful if anybody, the descendants of slaves, indigenous people, say, we would like to have some reparation here, and we want it paid for out of the profits of what you stole from us, which is unearned income.
Yeah.
No peace movement and no champions for the oppressed and the poor and Black people in particular have ever talked about economic justice clearly enough to make a difference. If they would, wow.
Peter Forrest.
Basically, we've got in Liverpool a project which we've named the Great Reclaim. And the basis of that is that all the infrastructure that exists on this planet, we the people have built, generally for the people who've got all the money and the power. So we're saying, look, the Great Reclaim is the living infrastructure of men, women, and children, without which there is no marketplace, without which there is no demand. So basically, we're creating a model called market space, not marketplace. This is a space for the living infrastructure to get together as co-owners, co-producers, co-suppliers, and co-consumers of the things that they want to produce and consume in the ways that they want to do it. And the way they do it is through a living infrastructure locally of cooperatives.
Peter?
So you have, yeah.
Is there a website you could refer us to learn all about that?
TGL Hubs, HUBS. That's Hubs for Teaching, Giving, and Learning. So it's
All right.
tglhubs.com.
yeah, I want to say to Peter, please, if I may, Peter, here on board here is Dave and Heather Wetzel. And since you're UK people, could you please have this conversation? They're with the Labor Land Campaign, and they're going to be able to clearly show you how worker power, worker ownership relates to the land value tax. And you guys are going to be able to form a really powerful movement around that.
And when this letter is sent to the Crown, send it to the whole of the British Parliament and all of US Congress. Why not? Good idea.
I want to make
All right.
just a few quotes, just read a few quotes. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. And then Gandhi said, there is enough for everybody's need and not for everybody's greed.
Mhm.
And then we cannot negotiate with people who say what's mine is mine and what's yours is negotiable.
President Kennedy.
JFK. And then
Ah,
if you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable.
very important.
Again,
And
JFK.
yeah.
And we're on his road to peace.
We are on his road to peace. Daniel, please unmute yourself. Daniel Gregg.
First of all, this is great, very inspiring to me. I'm really glad to hear that this is in process and working. But the big thing that comes up with me is what we need, where our work lies, is in the transition. Because like when they got away with apartheid in South Africa, right? There was no transition. There was no opening to the land and education of people that had lost their connection to a natural lifestyle, to indigenous ways. So I think that transition is really where the work is.
The real purpose of this is to act. After you read this letter, you have a big step that you have already taken to understanding. Basically, what we have now is a war economy, and we are going to change it to a peace economy. You take away the whole motivational structure okay, that gets in play when people feel threatened. They're not going to have enough. And that eventually leads to, I think, to the kleptocrats who become so addicted and so capable of taking advantage. And I think, the description of what happened to the Georgist economics, where they had to basically create a whole new kind of economics to completely override it. And what we ended up thinking was that socialism and communism was the only option, and it clearly wasn't.
Carol writes, money being the most powerful tool of empire also needs to be reformed. Gandhi, in his effort to liberate India from Britain, got the landowners, many of them, to redistribute land, but the moneylenders were able to get it back. With the financial crisis, collapse of the dollar, threat of CBDC, we do have a unique opportunity to reclaim our rights, our governments, and make substantial reforms to the corrupt systems which have so violently attacked all of life. Wendell, you can come live, or I could read land reform and land redistribution was not part of the end of apartheid and still has not happened there. Without solving the issue of the land question, the oppressed have not been truly benefited. Wendell, do you want to augment that?
No, I think it speaks for itself.
David Geeson, if I'm saying that right, socializing land values disconnects money from land debt. That monumentally reforms money. Alanna?
Yeah, because most of money is borrowed to buy land. And then you buy land and then you speculate on the land. So as economist Michael Hudson says, debt is used to capture the unearned income from land and resource rent. But regarding Carol's concern about the money problem, we're just saying it's important. I had thought of bringing a few paragraphs into the letter, but it's also a very big topic and I couldn't do justice to it because we did want to focus on the land problem. Henry George was very clear that the fundamental problem is the human relationship to the actual planet, the actual resources, the tangibles, and that money, many of us here would consider as a secondary problem, certainly an important one, but we would point out that is a symbol system. Money is a symbol system of wealth. We're looking at the underlying wealth creation, but many of us here who understand the land problem and work for land value tax would be for definitely a money system that's not based on any kind of usury or profiteering in money. That money would just be considered an infrastructure to exchange wealth. That's the problem. And that is where you also get the perennial wisdom teachings on money. No usury, no interest. That is also very much in the Jubilee Justice tradition.
All righty. Wendell and Alanna, thank you for your last thoughts with no rush. Paul Fitzgerald, final thoughts. Elizabeth Gould, final thoughts. And then Kris Millegan.
I really don't think there's any other way for all of us to go at this point. I think it's a salvation for humanity, and I think that it will be received whatever difficulty has been in the past, and there has been enormous difficulty getting people to understand what's the need for this sort of thing. I think people are going to be very receptive to this idea right now.
And I want people to understand by being able to focus on one individual and realize he is the embodiment. King Charles is the embodiment, and he is also in a very unique position right now. And if we have any power, it is to put a good idea in front of him that more and more people believe, and more people want him to realize he has to take it in. He has to consider it. We can't force him, we know that. But the influence and the pressure from the people coming up from the ground, all right, is what we're looking for. It actually happened with Queen Elizabeth. When Princess Diana died, she wanted nothing to do with Princess Diana. She wasn't going to honor her in any way. Well, when the people left thousands and thousands and thousands of flowers, nobody criticized the Queen for what she was doing. But when she came to Buckingham Palace and saw the expression from the people, she had to honor Diana. That's what we want to happen to Charles.
And she came out and she mingled with the crowd. And dive into these roundtables. Rewatch this one again. Really study Alanna's letter. Watch Alanna's presentation, Sacred Rule Economics, on Roundtable 16 on the YouTube channel, Valediction Vision. And now my boss at TrineDay, Kris Millegan.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, Justice John Marshall in 1826 made a ruling based on one of those papal bulls. Okay, and he basically said that the American Indian religion was spacious. It didn't mean anything. There happened to be a gentleman here in Oregon who found disfavor with that and took him to court. And in Smith versus Oregon, that papal bull was declared invalid as far as for the laws of the United States. Okay, so we can do something. A lot of times people think, oh, what can we do? You know, all these people up there, they're so powerful and everything. But one person in Beijing stood in front of a tank. Okay, it's amazing just what one person can do. And if you get a handful of people, you can even do more, you know? So spread this letter around, spread this love around for our Mother Earth. She deserves it. And onwards to a better future.
Onward.
Onwards, Kris.